So, my encounter happened about 7 years ago. I haven't really spoken about it since it happened, as I kind of just wanted to move on, and I was really unnerved by the whole experience. I was 25, I'm female, and I was working a job as an admin assistant office worker to tide me over and pay my bills until I eventually figured out what the career of my dream was. I was tired of the job. I had been there for about a year when this happened. And believe me, when the creepy shit went down, I was certainly incensed to get myself on a decent career path and the hell out of that place. Alright, so you understand my old workplace building, which will give you a clear picture of how this began. I worked in a somewhat old building with a few floors. And on each floor, there were numerous office spaces which were rented out by different companies. It was a pretty open-plan building, some parts more dilapidated than others, and it was in serious need of refurbishment to bring it A, up to health and safety standards, and B, cosmetic standards for the general public. How the offices on my floor were set out meant that our small office, which only consisted of 4 or 5 workers on different days, was situated at the front of the building with access through the front and back of the building, but nobody really used the back. Our staff quarters, as we called them, the lunchroom, were situated at the back of the building, and being an older style building meant that there was a long hall and lots of space between the office and the staff quarters. The staff quarters were only used for lunch breaks, and as we were in such a small office, we all rotated our lunch breaks so that only one person was off for lunch in the lunchroom at a time. Nobody else really used the lunchroom, as they preferred to go out and get lunch from the nearby shops. But as I had a shorter lunch break, it was always me, alone in the lunchroom at the back of this old creepy-ass building by the rear entry point. Other parts of the building were now under refurbishment, so there was a lot of upheaval in certain spaces and areas. But we managed to retain ours as normal for the while, before building work was scheduled to begin on our floor anyway. Bear in mind that the lunchroom was so far back from the main offices that nothing could be heard or seen either way. There were only 2 companies on the ground floor where I was situated. The other one was on the other side of the building and used the front entrance. But we rarely saw them and certainly didn't keep track of their staff members or clients, as there was no need for us to see who was going in or out. Anyway, I digress. I was sitting in the lunchroom one day, eating. A heater was going as it was freezing. Minding my own business, when out of the corner of my eye, I saw a shadow quickly sweep past the door from the light underneath it. It wasn't unusual for new clients to be wandering around, looking for the specific office they required, and as we were on the ground floor, there was often a slew of stupid people wandering the corridors aimlessly, looking for the office they required. We did have a code entry system on the front door and a telephone system, so you could press the office you needed to get into. It would call through and they would let you in, so people couldn't just walk in without being let in, if you understand what I mean. We also had a code for workers to use to get through the front door. As I said, the back door wasn't used much, apart from the odd worker who had a set of keys for it, and it was completely unmonitored. I wasn't too startled, even when the lunchroom door opened this particular day, and a smart-looking man put his head round, suited and booted and smelling like expensive cologne. I honestly was more embarrassed to see someone as attractive peering in, as I was sat there with the mayo splatter on my shirt and a mouthful of bread looking an absolute state. But hey, I didn't usually see anyone back there, and I am a messy eater, I admit. "Hey, can I help you?" I asked him, trying to clean myself up. He laughed and said that I looked like the one who needed help, and I admittedly laughed back, aware that he was still at the door and not imposing on me in any way. Yet. When I laughed along with him, he seemed to take that as an invitation to come right in and sit opposite me at the table, and to my surprise, he took some food out of his expensive-looking leather bag and started brazenly eating a sandwich. "Hey, I'm the HR manager for the company upstairs. And every time I go out to get my lunch, I always wondered who was sitting in here alone. So I just thought I'd have a look," he said, still eating and seemingly very calm and chilled. The weird thing about him was that he seemed so normal. Nothing about this guy made me worried. In fact, it was nice to have some company on my lunch break, as most of the time I just sat scrolling through the crappy news articles on my phone. We carried on chatting, mostly about mundane stuff. I asked him about his job and the company upstairs, and he asked me about mine. I asked him about where he usually took his lunch breaks. Just normal small talk, really. But it felt more comfortable than that. This guy was super charming. He made me feel at ease. And that part is the most chilling to me. I was totally at ease and unguarded with this guy. It became a pretty regular thing for him to join me in the lunchroom too. And honestly, I was beginning to get a bit of a crush on this guy. He had a good job, he was attractive, he was really charming and normal. In fact, I began looking forward to seeing him. Stupid, I know. A little attention from an attractive guy. But hey, I was single and not bad looking, so I figured, why can't I have some harmless little crush? He told me that his name was Alan, and honestly, I didn't intend to take it anywhere with him. I was totally happy, single at the time, and I was getting some minor flirtations from him, but nothing confirmed that he had a crush on me too, or wanted to take anything further. He moaned about the building work taking place, and how the whole upstairs offices were a mess. Their break rooms, etc., had all been gutted, and he was glad to have somewhere to eat his lunch that nobody else knew about from his office. Again, not your average creeper, I know. At this point, I didn't even think the guy was a creeper. Until one day, when things took a turn. Alan stormed into the lunchroom one Thursday, and I swear in his eyes, I saw the look of a caged animal. You know that crazy look? You know that restless and jittery and hyper look that kind of says someone isn't thinking straight at all? I immediately had my guard up a bit because I had never seen him like this before. It freaked me out the way that he stormed into the room, slammed his bag down on the table and started ranting about his boss was a fuck, and he wished that he could gut him like a fish. All while pacing around, running his hand through his hair, beads of sweat forming on his brow and rage in his eyes. I'd always thought that his eyes were so pretty before, but they were a steely blue right now, and they looked darker and more imposing than ever. I was repeatedly saying that it would be okay, and calm down, and let's eat, and whatever had happened, I'm sure it could be sorted out. He slumped down in his chair, and I went over to him, kind of standing beside him, but obviously over him, and I put my hand on his shoulder to console him. With that, he flew up, pushed me back against the wall. I was stunned, and I couldn't speak. His body was pressed against me, and almost like through his rage, he was in a trance-like state. After he pushed me back against the wall, he just stood there, his hands holding my wrist down by my side, almost like he was taking some weird comfort from the fact that he had me up against the wall. He buried his face into my neck, and I was frozen to the spot. Like, what the fuck was going on here? I always said that I would never be one of those girls in an emergency or dangerous situation to freeze. But honestly, I had never been in this type of situation, and I could tell that he was really volatile in this precise moment. I really didn't know what he was going to do, so I didn't want to risk pissing him off, and then have him attack me or something. I stood there for what felt like an eternity, his face buried in my neck, still holding my wrist quite forcefully, when all of a sudden, he licked my neck and said, "You smell nice." yeah, he actually licked my neck. Seeming calmer, that's when I decided, no, I'm not standing here with this person who is clearly unstable, holding me up against a wall in anger, and then suddenly being all soft-spoken again and licking my neck in this weird predatory way. That's what it felt like to me right in that second, and I felt so stupid for starting to eat with this guy and not even questioning why he was coming to our lunchroom. I told him to get off me, that I was leaving, and at that point, I was prepared to take a beating. It shouldn't have been like that, but I honestly didn't know what his deal was. Was he crazy? Was he just emotional or upset? Was he trying to seduce me? Was he going to hurt me? I didn't fucking know, but I realized that I didn't even know this guy. We spent half an hour to an hour a day in each other's company, passing the lunch hour, but I didn't really know anything about him as a person. It had only been a couple of weeks of lunches together, and I realized how short an amount of time that was to really have an idea about who a person was. He let go of my wrists, and then in the most sinister tone that I've ever heard, he said,
"You always seemed like you wanted it to be, you fucking whore."
Before I could respond, he grabbed his bag and stormed out of the lunchroom, and tears just sprung to my eyes. I cracked the door open to make sure that he'd gone, and I just sprinted back to the front of the building where my office was and told the guys in there everything that had just happened. They were absolutely fuming. They knew that this guy had been hanging around me in the lunchroom, but as I'd always been comfortable with it and thought Alan was okay, nobody ever thought anything of it. They actually thought that it was hilarious every day when I came back from lunch, all tongue-tied after my encounter with attractive Alan, as they now referred to him. They insisted that we march upstairs that moment and put in a complaint at his company, and knew that even if I didn't agree, they would march up themselves to do it. Eventually, I agreed, after feeling shaky and vulnerable, but I knew that I didn't want to have to face Alan after the incident in the lunchroom. I went up regardless, flanked by two guys I worked with, one of whom was my immediate boss. As we began explaining the situation, it was evident that something was really wrong. The woman and the man from the upstairs company looked really confused when I explained about their HR manager, Alan, and what he had done. They explained that their HR manager was a female called Jules, and that I must have been mistaken because there was no Alan that worked at the company. Well, we asked every single company in the building, and not one company had an Alan working for them, and never had. We eventually came to the conclusion that Alan had been coming in every day for lunch, but with absolutely no idea why or what for. We also didn't know if he had the building code or a set of keys for the back, and we didn't know where he had initially come from, unnoticed, wandering freely around the building. The locks were changed, obviously. The key code was changed, and CCTV was installed, as it never had been before. Plus, stringent security checks were put in place at the building after this incident, with everybody entering the building being monitored. Well, I never ever saw Alan again, and I still to this day don't know why he was coming into the building every day, having lunch with me, pretending to be an office worker. And I don't know what happened that day when he just flipped like he did. All I know is that I'm a hell of a lot more careful now after this experience.